All right, guys, welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zona, a holiday edition. Harold Shelton III sitting here joining us. And you see Harold, occasionally he'll walk behind the camera, or occasionally he'll get on camera at the Big Ten Network, Senior Research Manager. Harold, appreciate you joining us. Happy holidays to you. And the Big Ten has four teams that could win the whole thing. And it all starts off Friday night. Indiana, Notre Dame, two teams within 200 miles of each other. Now, this isn't what I thought about when I thought, oh, okay, teams are going to have a home field advantage. I'm thinking like, oh, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss. Indiana is like, yeah, we know what the cold is. We know what the snow is like. We know what all of this feels like. So Notre Dame, bring your best and let's see what happens. For Kirk Cignetti, this is his way of validating the whole Google me. Let's see what you can do.
Yeah, it's funny. Like these teams haven't met, in over 30 years, despite being in the same state, despite being 200 miles apart. I feel like Indiana's gonna have a little extra juice, going into this game. Though, oh, you too good to play us, kind of thing. Like, all right, now's our chance to finally win one of these big games. And so, you couldn't get more David and Goliath when you talk about the two programs. Notre Dame's played in 104 top 10 matchups, and Indiana's played in 4. So, like, when you talk about, like the difference in program, the difference in prestige, is completely night and day. But this is what they brought Cignetti in. I mean, I don't think they saw this coming in year one, but this is a chance for a guy who's done playoffs in the past at different levels, who's won an FCS national championship. This is how he can show, I'm ready for the big time. And they can really cap this season off with a signature win, which they haven't had yet. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this one more than any other one.
All right, so the difference for this is it just Indiana's, when they play in prime time, because they were able to beat the hell out of the bad teams. Okay, let's face it, their schedule was not great. That was one of the big knocks on Indiana. And when they did play some teams that were good, man, they played Ohio State, and that looked like a totally different team. And you almost are thinking, man, I'm so glad we didn't have to play the role of Penn State and have to play Oregon, because that would have probably looked bad. What do they learn from the Ohio State game that they could bring into this Notre Dame game and play under the bright lights?
So, yeah, I think for me, it's going to be line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball. Whoever wins that probably wins the game. I think offensively, as you mentioned, they played two top 15 defenses all year, and that was Michigan and Ohio State. And in those games, they only ran for like 62 yards, on average, scored less than 18 points on average, gave up 9 sacks. And then you talk about all their other games, they only gave up 9 sacks. In the other 10 games, they scored close to 49 a game. They had nearly 500 yards a game. So I think for Indiana, they have to find a way to hold up. They got to find a way to pass protect a little better. I think Notre Dame is strictly a man coverage team. Like, they play more man coverage than any team in the country. So I think if you're Indiana, if they're going to be sending pressure, you got to throw some screens. You got to throw some slants. And hopefully you can get a missed tackle somewhere and be able to take it to the house. Because I didn't feel like I saw much of that against Ohio State. It was a lot of jailbreak stuff, and then Rourke was just kind of going like this, and the play was over. And so they got to be able to get that ball out quick and just be ready for Notre Dame to come after them, because they do get a lot of pressure on the quarterback.
Indiana crowd going to show up you think they're going to show up to this to South Bend?
I think so. I mean, it's especially because the basketball team isn't having quite the start that they thought. If you're Indiana, this is probably the biggest game you've had since, the 60s, if ever. So you've had
I thought they moved graduation around to make sure that everybody can get to this game. So I was just wondering, because I'm going to be interested to see what the crowd looks like. The Notre Dame people buy the tickets. It's going to look like a high school game where it's 50-50. I'm very interested to see how this looks.
Yeah, me too, because I know it's easily the most expensive ticket of the 4 playoff games this weekend. And so I got to imagine that's a combo of both fan bases showing up and spending big money on this.
But yeah, like I said, for Indiana, a lot of empty calories. Where it looks like, oh, they're great. But man, like I said, when you played Michigan and you played Ohio State, I saw a totally different team, and I think this is a chance to validate that season for them. Speaking of empty calories, I guess I was kind of impressed with Penn State. And the next game, it'll be at noon, Penn State SMU. They went into the Big Ten championship game and they didn't quit. They actually had fight. They gave Oregon a game until the end. And normally this is just a James Franklin kind of staple where big games, he becomes small game James, and he just doesn't get it done. They actually did something. Is this a different Penn State team? And I'm going to get to the quarterback situation in a minute, but is this a different Penn State team this year?
It certainly could be. I was encouraged to see them just kind of just let it play, just hang loose, because there's been so many of those big games where they went really conservative, they went really tight, and I think partly because the game was starting to get away from them early that they just said, you know what, we got to throw it, we got to mix it up, we got to pull out some trick plays, we're gonna have Tyler Warren double pass, we're gonna do all of this stuff, and it's like, that's how it should be. You brought in Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas to, invigorate this offense. And you didn't give him a chance to do it against Ohio State. So now it looked like in that Oregon game, they were letting it all hang out. And so if that's the team that we get through the playoffs, I think they could be pretty dangerous with that draw. And the good thing too is, we talked about James Franklin and the issues in the big games and all of that stuff. Those were all top 10, top 5 opponents. If you look, SMU's outside the top 10. So, they've won 7 straight at home against ranked teams not in the top 10. So this is a game you feel like they should be able to win. I think the fact that their offensive line is played as well as it has. I mean, they ran for 292 yards against Oregon. They allowed 2 tackles for loss the whole game. And that's a really good Oregon front, really good Oregon defense. And they had their way with them. So their offense plays like that, they're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, because I look at this and, if you're Penn State, you don't want to start looking ahead at that draw of wow, it's the path is set up for us to get to the semifinals. All we got to do is knock out SMU, then what you're looking at, Boise down the line. Got to beat SMU first. Now, I kind of felt bad because for Penn State, one of the most intimidating environments I will always say is the whiteout. You can have it. It's just going to be at noon, and it's not the same.
Yep.
I don't know what Penn State did. At least Ohio – maybe they got to complain like Ohio State because Ohio State got the night game. So much so that Ohio State social media was just like, yes, finally we don't have to play at noon. Penn State playing at noon. I think it would be a bigger advantage if they played this SMU game at night because I think it would be very intimidating because I don't think SMU would have seen anything like this environment in wherever conference they came from or the ACC.
I agree with that. And it would have been colder at night. And that's the thing. You want as many advantages as possible. You got a team coming up from Dallas. You're talking about playing in a game in the teens potentially. Now, it's still going to be cold. I think the high on Saturday is supposed to be 27. I think their coldest game in program history is 24 degrees. So, they're not going to be used to that type of cold. But like you said, at night, the whiteout, all of that stuff, it looks better. It sounds louder. I think the environment is just more intimidating when it is at night. But I think they'll still have a very good crowd there. And if they play the way they're supposed to play, that's a game that they should win.
Now you move over to the next game. At least the next Big Ten game is going to be later that evening. That's Ohio State and Tennessee. Weather is going to be really cold in that game. I look at this Buckeye team. Harold, let's face it, the fan base is not happy. They're not happy. It's still, I guess, is it going to be a Michigan hangover? Or can they just shed this thing? Because if Ohio State comes out and goes a couple 3-and-outs, does the crowd turn on them and start booing them? Maybe that's a disadvantage of playing at home.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really big factor in this game. And, we talked about it the last time we were on where, the fact that if Michigan was able to keep this game close, you would wonder if the crowd would start to turn on them, if Ohio State would start to get tight. And that's exactly what happened. I remember the scenario where they got the first pick off of Davis Warren, and they were inside the red zone, or right outside the red zone, I should say. And they ran it on first down and the crowd started booing. And it's like, man, it's just a first down run. Like you're
They
like,
knew what was up though.
right. But they knew what was up. And then it was an incomplete pass. And then they ran it again on third and they wound up missing the field goal. And at that point, like the crowd was completely over it. And you could just tell it was just nothing but anger in that building. And so you wonder if Tennessee goes up 7-0 or if it's 14-0 or if it's close and the offense isn't moving the ball. You wonder if that crowd does turn. But I will give Ryan Day credit for this. We saw in 22 that when they made the playoff after a home loss to Michigan, and people were wondering if they should have even been there. And he had a game plan ready to go against Georgia, and C.J. Stroud looked the best he ever did in Ohio State uniform. And if not for Marvin Harrison getting knocked out of that game and what should have been a targeting penalty, they probably win a national title. So we've seen him scheme things up and be able to bounce back after a tough loss to Michigan, especially against an SEC team. And so I feel like they're better equipped to play SEC football anyway because they have the skill position players to do that. But I think he can't get into the whole, I'm going to be tougher than you, I'm going to be stronger than you, especially with the offensive line injuries that they have. He just can't afford to do that. So if they play to their strengths, which is their receivers and their running backs and Will Howard being able to scramble a little bit, I think that's a game they could win. They also got to stop the run too, because that's absolutely what Tennessee wants to do.
I mean, it's got to be weird, but if you're a Buckeye fan, you didn't want to see that, number 10 in the Heisman finalist was your former quarterback in Kyle McCord. Like,
yep.
Man, maybe you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and you're looking at a different team because Kyle McCord, unfortunately, was blamed for the Michigan loss last year. And I was like, he actually,
he didn't play bad in that game.
Right. It's like, okay, he threw a pick, but
he got hit on the throw.
Right. And then he goes to Syracuse, and the coach is like, "Man, I got to send them a fruit basket. This is the greatest thing you ever did." He was the guy. He was out there he was picking the garbage. Like, oh, for real? Let me throw some Febreze on him. This thing is going to be all right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Say what?
So yeah, that's exactly what it was. And then you look and then see what Will Howard did against Michigan, and you're like, I mean, was that really an upgrade? But he's got a chance to prove it in this playoff, and we'll see what happens from there.
So, and then you look at the Ohio State defense. I mean, are they going to be able to slow down Tennessee and Nico Imalava? Dang, I had practice today. Practiced it. Nico,
yeah. So I think they want to run the ball more so than anything. And if Ohio State's been really good against the run for most of the year. We saw Michigan was able to run the ball against them. You wonder if that was a one-off or not, but they've been able to corral Oregon's run game. They corralled Indiana's run game. So if they could do the same thing again to Tennessee and make Nico have to beat them with his arm, I think that's a recipe for success. And again, I think the biggest thing, though, Ohio State has to get a lead. They got to play from up front. They got to win that crowd over early, because then they could play loose like they did against Indiana. Like, they can't play tight. They have too many weapons, and they just need to kind of go to Penn State route where it's like, look, we got all of these guys. We got all of these five-star talents all over the field. Like, let's go let them loose.
Right.
And I think they do that, they should win.
Now, going back to Penn State, I guess they lose one of their weapons when they use both quarterbacks on the field. Because the backup QB, because Drew Aller says I'm coming back, the backup QB is like, well, that means I'm not going to play here. I got to hit the portal. But not only do I have to hit the portal, guys, I love you, but I got to leave. Now, my Uber's waiting for me outside. Good luck in the game. James Franklin's upset about it. I mean, is that going to be a big difference, something big for Penn State? Because they like putting both QBs out on the field for a couple trick plays like that. And look, I've said it. I said it on my show, plain and simple. I can fix this. It amazes me that supposedly the best and the brightest, the smartest of men, presidents and athletic directors and coaches of NCAA institutions can't get this right. It's real simple to me. You get one transfer. Your kid, you make a bad mistake, you pick the wrong school, I'll allow you one transfer. But right now, you got kids who are just using this for a raise, using this for advantage. I mean, when I found out a guy like Bear Alexander is literally about to hit his 7th school. He went to 4 different schools in high school.
Crazy.
4 different schools in high school. Georgia, USC. Now it looks like he's going to Penn State. He flexing at Penn State with a Georgia tattoo on his bicep.
I saw that.
It's like everything that's wrong with college football. You get one time to transfer, and the portal is open once. It's open from the middle of May to June, and that's it. I don't want to hear about early enrolling, because if you want to early enroll, you stick with your school and you ride it out and you develop. But this whole I'm going to leave before the bowl game, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. We're going to open this thing up. You get one transfer. If you transfer a second time, it's like the old school transfer. You got to sit out a year. So, okay, you can, but you got to pay a tax. You got to pay a penalty. You do this at May, and you don't have a situation like what happened with Marshall, where they just didn't have a team. They didn't have a coach. They didn't have a team. It's like I feel bad for all the players that stuck around, because you win your conference and you get nothing. I guess you'll get a ring, and that's about it.
Yeah. In terms of how it affects the game, I think Aller might have to be a little more cautious on how many times he takes off, because there's no proven guy behind him. And we've seen Penn State, especially in his last game, Aller ran for 54 yards. He's run for a touchdown in 3 straight games. Like, you might have to avoid putting him in harm's way as much, because the guy behind him has no experience. Like, it's a true freshman who hasn't played a snap all year. Like, that's
now the good news is SMU is in the exact same situation.
Yep.
They're back up.
Which again, a complete problem. Like, the fact that you have this portal window open when it's open, knowing that the playoffs were here and all that stuff, it just doesn't make sense. And I get it for Perdue if he's trying to enroll early and he's like, I don't want to leave, but all the spots are going to be gone by the time January comes. If we win these 2 games, then where I'm gonna go? I don't want to sit behind Aller for another year. And Franklin's like, I mean, you got to leave. I get it, but if that's what you got to do, like, go ahead.
I guess the thing is he really in high demand? Like, are people beating down the door? Because I got to think, if they really want you, they'll wait. They'll wait for you.
Yeah, I guess for me, and I'll kind of bring it back Big Ten wise. I know Indiana had a similar situation where Cignetti wanted to get his quarterback from James Madison. They wanted to bring him along, but I guess he had to wait to see if they were going to get a 6th year or not for him. And he's like, man, do I wait? Do I not? And he's like, well, I need to go ahead and get a quarterback just in case. So then went and got Rourke. Now, I worked out for him, but, if he waits and he doesn't get him and there's not as many quarterbacks left, then you kind of screwed. So I can see both sides of it. And again, I don't know what Perdue would get in terms of interest. I guess he visited Missouri already and stuff like that. So maybe there is some high level interest there. But I mean, the timing of it and just seeing guys, leave right before playoff games start is crazy.
I thought that the playoffs would make the playoff teams exempt from that, but
same.
They have to step up. They got to do something, man.
And
it's such a simple solution. Just, we're not gonna have a bunch of portal openings. You get one transfer, and you do it one time a year. So you know what that requires, Harold? Thought. It's not reactionary. It's not, well, the coach ain't play me enough. You got to sit and think.
Yep.
I get one move. Is this the move I want? Other than that, maybe I just need to sit. Because here's the thing, and we talked about this. I talked about my radio partner. If the portal existed, there would have been no 2015 MSU team. Mm-hmm. Because all of those guys were developed. I mean, heck, Jeremy Langford around. He was a receiver. He was a running back. Then he was a cornerback. Then he was a wide receiver. Then he went back to running back. He would have left. Tony Lippett, he would have been gone. Like, all those guys wouldn't have. Connor Cook wouldn't have sat there and been the 3rd string quarterback. He would have left and played someplace else. All of those guys would not have stuck around. There is no development. It's either you play me now and I need to be happy and you got to pay me my money, or I'm going to leave.
Yep.
So
Sad state of affairs. I still don't understand. Like, why can't you just open the portal when the football season ends? So, like, if the championship game is on the 20th, 21st, portal can open. Then everybody can do what they want to do.
Because you got to early enroll in the next semester. But then I'm also laughing like, education's not important to you. Let's just be real. Like,
exactly. They don't care about that.
Oh, well, I got to enroll for classes. You're not going to ever go to classes. And if you do, they're going to be online. And even when I was a student, you don't miss much in the first 2 weeks.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what's called late registration, because you would have people add the class after the class had already started.
Exactly.
They got to fix this, or else it to me, it will turn off a lot of people, because now you just won't. The whole thing, you're gonna need a scorecard to know who's on your team. It's like college football is really turning into community college football, where every year it's an entirely different roster. So I'm gonna get off that soapbox. Let's move.
Man, basketball ain't much better.
I was about to say, yeah, they end up going to the pro, so it's college sports. But yeah, you're right. College hoops is the same. But let's talk about some college hoops. Big Ten has already started. They already got a couple games in, and lo and behold, you look at the top of the Big Ten, and you got two teams from the state of Michigan, both undefeated, both ranked. Wednesday night, Michigan loses a heartbreaker game, a game that I thought they had wrapped up. Jeremiah Fears, the brother of Jeremy Fears, for the Oklahoma point guard, turns the ball over on 2 straight possessions late. Looks like Michigan's wrapped it up. They're up 3. And then, Harold, it's the one thing that I'll never understand. I've had this conversation. Well, I've had this argument with Tom Izzo for the longest. It's math. I'm up 3. I'm not going to let you shoot a 3. Yep. And I'm going to foul you, because all you can do is make 2 points. I'm still winning with the ball by 1. Fate's still in my hands. They let the game play out. Fears kicks his legs out a la Reggie Miller style. But, he gets the foul. He gets the 4-point play. And then Michigan comes down, and with really no play, jacks up a 3, ill-advised, because I'm like, you're only down 1. Why don't you just go to the basket? But What do I know? And they lose that game. But Michigan, ranked team, man, looking at Wolf and Golden, they're going to be problems, because Wolf, he's this big – he's like a 7-foot point guard. Mm-hmm. When they do that high pick and roll, you're dead. You're dead in the water. There is nothing you can do unless you got 2 big men, because whichever way the big man goes, the other guy's going to get the ball, and it's going to be an immediate mismatch.
Yeah, no doubt. The 2 7-footers thing is going to be a problem for a lot of Big Ten teams. Good luck trying to defend that. And like you said, the fact that Wolf has guard skills to be 7 foot, it means that you still have the spacing where you can still have Golden down low and then surround him with shooters outside. They play a really fast style. They lead the country in 2-point percentage, not surprisingly, when you got 2 7-footers, but they shoot 62% inside the arc. They're I want to say the 15th fastest team in terms of like getting the ball up. So, they're really, really good. They do have a turnover issue. They don't really have a true point guard. So I think that's been part of the issue in some of these games. And just think about where they would be. They're 8-3, but they got a 2-point loss to Wake Forest, a 2-point loss to Arkansas, and a 1-point loss to Oklahoma, all the way from home. You're talking, at worst, they probably could be 10-1. All 3 of those games were extremely winnable.
10-1, but then on the flip side, they had an Iowa team that came back, and they got the goaltending call, and that helped them out. You hit upon something. I think for Michigan, the problem is the lack of point guard. You can have the 7-footers, but in the final 10 seconds of the game, look at what Oklahoma did. We're going to put the ball in my point guard's hand, let him create. You don't have that creator with this team. There is no Trey Burke coming out the tunnel that can lead this team and help them get stuff done. I think that's going to be the downfall for them. And I think that's also why you get so many turnovers, because you don't have that stabilizing force in the backcourt that can just say, okay, let everything run through me. I know we got 2 7-footers, but you know what? I'm going to run this team. It allows Wolf to freeze him up some, so he's not that responsible.
No, I agree. And we've seen, especially with the Beeline era teams, like all his really good teams had really good point guards, great assist to turnover ratio, all that kind of stuff. And if you're turning the ball over on 21% of your possessions, I mean, that's really hard to overcome. And even if that number was down to 17, 18, they're probably 10-1. So Dusty May's done a great job thus far, and I think they do a really good job in terms of the pace and the size advantage and all that stuff. But like you said, when stuff breaks down or you play a team that's got two bigs that can somewhat neutralize that, you're gonna have to get it from other places. And if you have a hard time getting in your offense, that could be an issue against some of the elite teams.
And then Michigan State started off unranked, and now I think they're up to 20th in the AP poll. They had a win over Oakland, I think the 23rd time in a row, because I asked Greg Campy, why do you play this game? And he was like, well, I do it for the players. And then he finally admitted, I also do it for the paychecks. I was like, man, that's like the hammer taking on the nail. Like the nail has never beaten the hammer, but you keep playing. But you look at this Spartan team, and I think what sticks out for me is this is probably the deepest team that I've seen MSU have in a long time, where you're not just relying on Kenneth Walker. You're not just relying on Cassius Winston. You're not just relying on an Aaron Henry. There's so many different people that can come out and score for you on any given night.
Yeah, and I think they've just kind of gotten back to their roots. He's talked about defend, rebound, and run forever, and we hadn't seen that in the last few years because they haven't been a good rebounding team. So because they can't get the rebound, they can't get out and push. And this year, they've been a top 10 team on the defensive glass all year. You got 2 point guards that could push it with Fears and Holloman. And you're way more athletic than you've been on the wing in some time, especially with the size. Obviously Cohen Carr's playing a lot more now. Jace Richardson, he looks like he could be a pro. Frankie Filler provides some size for them. You got the two bigs. Booker's coming into his own, so you got him as a trailer three who can also outrun a lot of fours and fives. So between the bench, between the rebounding, like they got the third most transition points in the country because they run, make, miss, turnover, whatever it is. They're getting out and trying to get easy buckets. I think they're top 10 in bench points on the year, top 10 in bench minutes on the year. So like you said, there's a lot of different ways to beat them. To beat their opponents. And so the fact that, Jaden Akins is their leading scorer with around 13 points a game, like, okay, if he's having an off night, maybe it's Holloman like we saw in the North Carolina game. Or if it's not him, then maybe it's Booker coming off the bench with, 15 points. Or
maybe it's Richardson.
Or maybe it's Jace. All right, so there's a lot of weapons there. I feel like 3-point shooting starting to come around. I know they started the season around 20% through the first 5 or 6 games. That's up to 35% or so in the last 4 or 5. So the shooting is getting better. I do wonder in crunch time, is there a go-to guy? But maybe you don't need it. Maybe it just is matchup dependent. I'd be curious to see how that works. But the usual Izzo staples of the good teams, like these are some of the things we haven't seen in the last few years. We're starting to see them now.
Yeah, I guess the go-to guy, I guess by default would be Akins, or honestly, to me, it's Holloman. I'd have more faith with the ball in Holloman's hands and let him create. He can be that point guard and just kind of get everybody where they need to go. Fears is good, but I don't look at Fears like his little brother where he can go out there and score. Fears is more the facilitator. But yeah, Holloman can hit the big shot because I've seen him hit the big shots, like you said, in the North Carolina game. So saying all that early on, who's the best team in the Big Ten? Because Purdue's great until you take them outside of Mackey. Michigan can't get the close games and win them. Michigan State, they played, Kansas, didn't quite get it done. Played Memphis, didn't get it done. Who's that team, or is there that Purdue from last year with Zach Edey and everybody else, or is this just going to be a free-for-all?
I think it's going to be a free-for-all. I think you can ask this question every week and you might get a different answer. If you look at the KenPom rankings right now, there's no Big Ten team in the top 12, but you got 7 between 13 and 25. So I feel like that's kind of where you're going to see a lot of the depth. I don't know if you'll see a team that gets like a a top 3 seed, but you're going to see a whole bunch of like 4s, 5s, and 6s throughout the year. I think Maryland's really good. Derek Queen is absolutely a pro. Another big who you'll have to worry about in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
He's a monster. I think UCLA, they won at Oregon. That's probably the best win that anybody has in the Big Ten as of right now, but they can't score. And so I don't know if you can win a lot of games in the high 50s, low 60s in today's college basketball, where it seems to be a higher pace. Like you said, with Purdue, they've got veterans, but we've seen them lose some games already. Texas A&M and Indianapolis, they were pretty much out of that game. Guard play hasn't been as good. We talked about the Michigan schools already. I think Oregon, even though they won that Vegas tournament, I've seen them struggle at home against Portland. They've needed a lot of second half comebacks to only have one loss, because they could easily have 3 or 4 at this point. Illinois, I think, is super talented. I think they got a couple of lottery picks on that team, but right now I think they're trying to figure out how to win, because it's a brand new team and they got like 10 new guys on that team. And so they're trying to figure it out on the fly. So I think at the end of the year, it could be Illinois, but right now I would lean Michigan State.
All right, Harold, appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. And I got to see if we can maybe open this back up next week, because we'll know what the quarterfinals for the college football playoffs. Now we'll talk about Oregon, and we'll see if any of the 3 Big Ten teams are there. So, guys, I can't promise you, because I got to make sure that the web guy is going to be around. I think he will be. And if that's the case, Harold, if I can get you back next week, I promise I'll let you get back to the fam and the turkey and the prime rib or whatever it is that you have. I won't take up too much of your time.
I'd love to be on.
All right. But for right now, guys, happy holidays to you. Rico Beard, Harold Shelton. You can see him. He works for the Big Ten Network. He's senior research manager. Occasionally, they let him get on camera. Occasionally, they pull his knowledge, but we get it right here on the 5-Star Zone. Thanks for watching. Keep liking and subscribing. As I said, happy holidays, and we'll try to be back next week.